So have you been thinking about raising ducklings or chicks? Well, if so, I'm hoping that this video will help you out. I'm gonna go put these little guys back. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. So I'm coming to you live from our dining room, kitchen, great room area. But I've been meaning to put a video together for a while, talking about what I think all the basics you need to know for raising chicks, ducklings, or both. So we've been doing this for 3 years now. We've raised our chicks a few different ways, and I think we have enough experience that we can try to compile all this information and give it to you. So if you've been on the fence about raising these animals, maybe this will give you the confidence to do so, or if you're just trying to add to your flock and you're looking for a video that has some information to help you out, hopefully we can accomplish that as well. So in my little notebook that Emmylou has covered in stickers here, I actually have an outline so that I try to stay organized. And this is going to be a very much information-based video, so I'm not going to have a bunch of fluff and nonsense in here. I'm going to try to take little videos of the things that I'm talking about and be able to put them up on the screen so it's like a picture-in-picture thing so that you can get a better reference of what I'm talking about. But if I forget to do so on certain things, I apologize. But let's get right into it. So to start off this conversation topic of raising chicks and ducklings, it might seem silly, but you do need to ask yourself, are we allowed to have chickens or ducks where we're at? Because if you live in a neighborhood that has an HOA, they're likely not going to allow it. If you have a smaller property, ducks might not be the best option because they're a little bit messier. So you want to take all of that into consideration. And if you can move on from that step and you've determined that yes, we can have them and we have some space for them, I think the next question that you need to ask yourself is, why do we want them? So few different reasons, right? You can get egg production, meat production. You can keep them as pets. They're fun to watch, and they can be great for your kids and your neighbors to come and hang out with them and see with them and interact. They are a lot of fun. So ask what your why is. For us, we want the eggs. We're doing our first batch of meat birds this spring. So for us, our why is, well, we want nutritional products to consume for our family and for our friends, and if we have some extra, we might give it away or sell it, but that's a whole different thing, selling farm product. But that's really it. You want to ask yourself why, because you're going to invest time and money into these animals. So don't get them if you just think that they're cute, because they do require some work. And it's not fair to the animals if you get them and after a few weeks you realize we don't want them and you just try to get rid of them. In most cases, I'm sure you could find somebody to get them, but it's just like any other animal. You shouldn't get them unless you're going to see it all the way through. So that is the first thing that you got to figure out. So once you've determined that you can have them and you know your why on why you want them, you got to figure out what kind do you want. There's about a gazillion chicken breeds out there. There's quite a few duck breeds as well. And I'm not going to go into all of them in this video because that would take a long time. But if your why is egg production, then do a little search on the internet on the best egg layers. If it's meat, look up various broiler or meat chickens. If you just want them for pets and something to look at, there are a bunch of like exotic breeds of chicken that look really cool and funny and fluffy. So maybe those are the breeds that you want to go with. So you need to answer those preliminary questions before you decide what types of chickens that you want to get, or ducks. For us personally, we have a wide range of egg layers when it comes to our chicken breeds. We don't have two of the same of anything currently, and our ducks are khaki Campbells because they are known for their egg laying production. They are proficient layers. They are dual purpose birds. They can be used for meat as well, but that is not why we have ducks. Our ducks are for duck eggs because they are delicious, and in my opinion they are better than chicken eggs. So to determine what breeds you want, do an internet search. There's a bunch of websites, good resources out there that will pop up just on a Google search, and you can check out the different breeds, see what they look like, see how many eggs they're gonna lay, what color eggs they're gonna lay, because that's always nice too, to have a little variety of brown, white, blue, green, all that kind of stuff. So you can look that up before going on to the next step. And I apologize if this gets a little repetitive. This is, I think, the first style of video here where I'm just trying to hit on info and I'm just trying to do a recap on everything. So once you know that you can have them, you know your why, you know what breeds you want to go with. The big thing that you got to consider next is infrastructure. Okay, so a brooder, right? That's where you're going to raise the baby chicks or ducklings for the first few weeks of their lives. You got to have that, and you want to make sure that that is set up before you acquire any birds and bring them home. We've used some plastic totes for a brooder. We've used a little kiddie pool for a brooder. We've used a stock tank for a brooder, and I built a mobile brooder. I can leave a card for that. And all of them have worked well. The biggest consideration is space and how big the brooder is. So depending on the number of birds that you have will determine what type of brooder you want to go with. Now, within the first few days of having the chicks or ducklings, they're very small, but they grow extremely fast. So if you have them in a tiny little brooder, that might work for a few days, but they're going to quickly outgrow it. And if you don't have something to put them in after, or start with a big enough container, it's just going to be a headache for you. It's not going to be as enjoyable. So make sure you have a big enough brooder. I don't think you can ever have too big of a brooder, because they'll hang out around the heat source in their food, in their water. So you can make a brooder as big as you want, and it'll never be too big. So you've got the brooder. The chicks and ducklings are only going to be in that brooder. We typically keep them in there for like 3 weeks, and that's weather dependent. And around a month, like that 3, 4, 5 week window, they're going to be ready to go into a coop. So there are a bunch of different styles of coops that you can go with out there. My recommendation is that you do your research based on the number of birds that you're going to have, and look at the square footage requirements. It's just a guideline. And again, this goes in, like, you can never have it being too big. If you put the birds in a small confined area, they're going to get messy, be more prone to diseases, and just be nasty and not fun to interact with. And you're going to end up neglecting them, and it's just not going to be good. So bigger is always better, in my opinion, when it comes to brooders and chicken coops. For your ducks and your chickens. But the coop thing, that's a whole nother deal. If you guys want me to talk about coop design and things that you should have in your coop in a later video, just let me know in the comments. But let's talk about what you need in the brooder itself. So your basic supplies, and I apologize that I'm looking down. I got my notes here. I don't want to miss anything. So feeders and waterers. If you go to your local farm store or wherever you get your chicken supplies or duck supplies, they're going to have a wide variety of feeders and waterers for you to choose from. We've used metal, plastic, small ones, big ones. It's all kind of personal preference. And they have a different price point on them, so that also is a consideration for you. I honestly don't think any of them are superior to others, so just go with whatever you want. But as the birds get bigger and they consume more food and water, they are going to need bigger food and water containers. So just know that if you have the ability to kind of buy everything at once, great. But if not, you will have to make some trips back to the store to pick up bigger waterers and feeders. Starting the chicks and ducklings off, we just have like a little, I think it's a 1 or 2 quart little thing of water in there. We got to change that a couple times a day. So if you want to go with a slightly bigger one, then you'd have to change it less often. But the ducklings, they splash around, they use more water. So you got to keep that in consideration if you're combining ducklings and chicks, which is absolutely okay to do. We've done it 2 years in a row now with nothing but success. And they seem to get along better when they're outside doing that as well. So the different feeders and waterers too, the bigger ones, if you got a big brooder, then you can get a big one. But another thing that you want to keep in mind is that baby chicks and baby ducklings, when they are just a few days old, they can drown very easily. So you don't want to put a big water source in there, because if you're not watching them 24/7 and one falls into it, they can drown in just like a tiny amount of water. So that's why we typically start with the small waterers and just increase the size as the birds get bigger, and that has worked super well for us. So the next big thing is a heat source, right? So most of you know what a heat lamp is. You can get it in multiple different stores, but it's critical. Before your birds arrive, that heat lamp needs to be on, and you want it to be, I've seen anywhere from like 90 to 100 degrees, right? You want some point in the brooder that is 90 to 100 degrees. You can use a little thermometer to measure that to make sure it's about right. But you don't need to do all that either, because if all the birds are underneath the heat lamp and none of them are venturing out to get their food and water, that means it's not low enough and it's not warm enough. And if everybody's too far away, that means it's too hot and it needs to be raised. So I think the recommendation is that every week you try to raise it so that it's 5 degrees cooler, and then eventually they won't need it after a few weeks, and then you can put them outside. But we just gauge it based off of the bird's behavior. So if they're all spread out, we raise it up. And then if everybody's grouped together, we lower it. It's too easy. We like the red bulbs. I prefer that. I think it's a little less intrusive on them, especially at night. But you can put a white lens in there too. It does the same thing. In your brooder, you're also going to need some form of bedding. Chick and duckling legs are very fragile, so you want to make sure that they have a nice surface to be standing on. So you don't want a bare brooder. You don't want like cardboard in there. You don't want anything that's slippery, because their legs can splay out and can break or just become deformed if they don't have proper footing. So we use pine shavings for the bedding. It absorbs a lot of the moisture, the water, the poop, all that kind of stuff pretty well, and it's relatively inexpensive, and you can throw some more in when it's needed. When there's a soiled area, you can throw more on there, and it's pretty easy to maintain. If you go with the pine shavings, you want to make sure that you don't get the super fine flakes, because that can get into their nasal cavity and give them respiratory issues. You got to think that they're in a pretty confined space, so if the shavings are super small, they're going to create a lot of dust, and it's just not going to be a healthy environment for them. So we go with like the medium or large flakes. That works extremely well for us. You just want something that's going to absorb the water and everything in there to help it be cleaner, hold in the smell. I think as far as cedar chips go, I want to say that I've read some things on that says that's not ideal for chickens or ducks either, because it can mess with their respiratory system, especially because cedar chips give off an aromatic smell. So we just stick with pine shavings. We keep it easy. Everyone carries the pine shavings. When it comes to the pine shavings, you do want to stay on top of it. So don't get lazy with that. Either completely remove the old stuff and put new stuff in, or just kind of layer it as you go, as needed. You also need some grit, so chick grit specifically, because it's really fine. It's basically just small rocks. So you can either buy grit at the store, or you could go outside if you have some soil that has small rocks and stuff in it. You can just throw a little bit of that dirt in there. But the purpose of that is chickens and ducks, they don't have teeth. So when they consume their feed, they need something to be able to break that up, and that's what grit does. It's just really small rocks. When our birds go outside, we don't give them any grit, because they're out on the ground and they get all the small rocks and stuff that they need, and they do it all on their own. So when you're providing them with grit when they're super young, you don't want to give them too much, because they can fill up on the grit and not eat enough of their feed for their proper growth. So just a little bit of grit in there. You can just sprinkle it in with their food, or I just sprinkle it in around the brooder, and they'll peck through it, scratch at the pine shavings, and find it. Staying on the brooder topic, you got to ask yourself, where are you going to locate the brooder? So baby chicks and ducklings are very susceptible to cold conditions and wind. So last year we had some ducklings and chicks that we got around June, and their brooder was outside immediately, and we didn't have any issues. There was still a heat lamp, but they were outside and they thrived. So if you're going to be putting them in your garage and you live in a northern climate where springtime the garage can still be very cold, maybe that's not the best option. Right now we currently have one in our living room and we have one out in the shop. Both climate controlled spaces. It makes the birds happier, and then you just want a well-ventilated space as well. So your brooder should not have a solid cover on it, because you want air to be able to circulate through there and keep the birds happy that way. For most new chicken owners, pets are also something that you need to keep in mind. Dogs and cats, though their intent is not malicious, they can get a hold of your baby birds and kill them or hurt them. And you don't want that. Nobody wants that. So if you're new to this and you haven't gauged your animals yet, put some type of hardware cloth or chicken wire or something secured on top of your brooder so that the dogs or the cat don't go in there and mess with the baby birds. So we have 2 dogs and a cat in our house. We've learned over the years that they are a-okay with baby chicks all the way up to the grown chickens and ducks. They don't mess with them. So we don't have to put anything on top. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to do it anyway, just as another safety precaution. But you'll know your pets better than anybody else. So just make sure that your household pets are not going to attack your birds. Keeping the brooder and the surrounding area clean is paramount. Most of your birds aren't going to have any issues if they have a clean area that they live in. So again, you want to replenish pine shavings whenever needed. You want to make sure they have clean water, clean feed. If one of them happens to poop in either of those, you want to clean that as soon as you realize it. Don't let it sit, and just keep the area clean, because the birds will be happy and healthy that way. All right, so you've got all your infrastructure ready to roll for your chicks. You've determined what kind you want to go with. So now the question is, well, where are you going to get them? So you have a few different options on where you can get baby chicks and ducklings. You can go to your local like farm store, like a Tractor Supply or something like that. Their breeds are going to be very limited, and I'm not sure, don't hold me to this, because we personally have not bought from a big feed store or anything like that. But I don't think that they sex the chickens. They might. If so, just check the label to make sure. Because if you pick up 6 chicks and you're wanting hens, but they were in an unsexed brooder at the store, and you end up with 6 roosters, you're not going to be very happy. So you can go big store. Like I said, we don't have personal experience, so as far as the health of the birds and all that kind of stuff, I can't really touch on that, but that is an option for you. You can go to your local hatchery. If you just search, you'd be surprised. There might be a hatchery not very far from you. And typically a hatchery is a smaller operation, family operated, and they typically have a larger selection of breeds that you can choose from. Not all hatcheries are going to have chickens and ducks, so you might have to shop around and go to some different ones. But we've done that just in our local community, gone to a hatchery, and we've been very happy with the birds that we've gotten from there. You can also use an online hatchery. We have done that now twice from 2 different hatcheries. For our ducks last year, we got the ducklings from a hatchery. They all arrived safely, perfectly fine. And then this year we got some egg-laying chickens and all of our meat chickens from an online hatchery. And let's talk about that real quick with the online hatchery, how that works. So you go on their website, they've got the list of all the different breeds that they have available for the specific time frame that you want them. Typically, they'll have male, female, or unsexed that you can choose from, and you put them in your cart and you order them. And they come via the United States Postal Service within 48, 72 hours. A chick can survive without food and water for 72 hours after they hatch. So the post office, typically, they call you, say, hey, your baby chicks are here. You drive to the post office. You pick them up, and they're in a little box that has ventilation holes, and you bring them home, and you put them in your brooder. Anytime you get new chicks, the first thing that I do, and I'm pretty sure it's very common practice, is when you take them out of the box that you got from the store, the hatchery, from the post office, is we take them and we just dip their little beaks in the water so that they know where the water is. They get a first little drink of water, and then we put them down, we let them roam around, do their thing. You don't have to try to force feed them anything, but just make sure you introduce them to that water source so they know where it is so that they can get it, because they're going to need it. And then finally, you can hatch your own. So some of the online hatcheries also, and your local hatcheries, might offer hatching eggs. So they're fertilized eggs ready to roll into an incubator, and you can do that. All of our ducks this year, we hatched out on our own, and that was a very fun experience. We didn't know if all of the eggs were fertilized. We had some chicken eggs in there as well, and only one chick hatched, but I think the other ones weren't fertilized. But for ducks, it was 28 days, and for chickens, it's 21. We just got an incubator from Tractor Supply. It worked really well. Super easy. The directions are straightforward. You just basically adding water in to maintain humidity and temperature, and that's it. And we got the one that has an automatic egg turner, so we didn't have to be turning the eggs and all that kind of stuff. But it was a very fun experience. And maybe not recommended for your first go at chicks or ducklings, but maybe after you get the ropes and you feel more confident, I would highly recommend it. It was super fun. All right, so you've got your chicks either in possession or you've ordered them, and they come to your door. You got them in your home, and you got to have the initial care, right? So we already talked about dipping their beaks in the water. We like to add in Save a Chick. It's like a little electrolyte powder that you can find on the internet or at your local farm store. It basically just adds electrolytes to their water, gives them a little boost. I've seen people just add a little bit of sugar to their water, does kind of the same thing. It just gives them a little extra energy, because when they're young and they haven't, specifically if you get them online and shipped to you, they've gone through a lot of stress of being on an airplane and in a vehicle and all that kind of stuff. So they're going to be drained, they're going to be dehydrated, and they're going to need a little bit extra. So we use that. That seems to help our birds out. A lot of people also put like a little bit of apple cider vinegar in the water. I've heard that that has helped as well. We did that for our grown birds a little bit. And to be honest, I didn't really see any change in their health or well-being with or without it. So we don't really do that. But things that you want to look for when you're getting your chicks home, and once they're in the brooder, if any of them are really lethargic, you're going to want to monitor them closely. In this batch that we just got in the mail, out of 61 birds, 3 of them didn't make it. One was DOA, and then 2 had that lethargic look to them where it was just like, it ain't gonna make it. And we had 1 duckling that needed some assistance hatching out that had that same kind of thing. You'll see some labored breathing, and they just don't want to move. They might be like seem really weak, and that's tough because it's hard to see any baby animal in a situation like that. But then you also want to make your best determination on, is this animal going to make it, or do you kind of need to end its suffering for it? So that's an individual decision that you have to make. It's not an easy one. So I understand if you try to do everything that you can to save it, but if it's 24, 48 hours old and it's not doing too hot, it probably has some issues going on with it, and it's probably not going to make it. So you just have to be aware of that. And if a baby chick isn't eating or drinking, that's something that you got to look out for. You could try isolating that bird, and if you have another heat source and water feeder, you could do all that. just to keep them from being trampled on by the other birds. But just being honest, if the bird ain't doing too good in the first few days, it's probably not going to make it. It's unfortunate, but that is something that you need to realize, and that kind of segues right into the next thing I want to talk about with other common problems and just dealing with loss. You could do everything that you're supposed to with these baby chicks or ducklings, and you can still lose some. So it's very common. Don't beat yourself up if it happens. Don't abandon your chicken raising adventure just because of that, because it happens a lot. Some of these birds have underlying conditions that you don't know about, and they're not going to make it. So in this go round for us, we've lost a duckling and 3 chicks. It sucks, but it does happen. So just know that. And if you have children that are old enough to understand what's going on, make sure that you explain to them that this might happen before you get them, just so that they can have a better understanding of what's happening and they can process it better, so that they're not traumatized by a baby chick that dies, because there is a possibility that it happens. But other common issues that you might see with your baby chicks or ducklings, and these are, I'm sure there's a lot more of them, but these are some that we have experienced. One being leg issues. So like I mentioned before, that's why you want them to be on a good surface, so that their legs aren't splaying. They might have a leg deformity that's just how they are when you get them. And we actually have a hen that we've had for 3 years now, that hen has had a issue with one of her legs for her entire life, but she still lays eggs, she still does all the chicken things, scratches with both legs, eats, drinks, everything. But she has a leg that we call her gimpy, because she just kind of hops around. She's always last, but she still is able to be a chicken, and she doesn't show any signs that issue is giving her pain. So I believe chickens will like pant, like when it's hot out, they actually pant. And if they're not showing any of those signs that they're in distress, and they're doing all of the chicken things, then you can let them continue on living. So leg issues will come up. Respiratory issues, we have dealt with that a little bit, but the electrolytes help with that. And then I'll snap a picture of them, but at your local farm store, there's some poultry cell we've used, and I think it's VetX or VetRx. It's just kind of like a little supplement that you can give them. So if you see like one of your birds sneezing a lot, you can put a little bit of that in their water, and that should clear that up. We've also had a chick that has dealt with wry neck. I think this is more uncommon, but it wasn't fun to deal with, and it's actually one of our silky roosters, and he made it. Jamie was a crazy chicken lady and actually like stayed up with this bird and slept with it on our couch. I wasn't doing that, but we were feeding that chicken that Vetrix or VetX, whatever it is. I showed you a picture in the poultry cell, and that he ended up pulling through. And after a few days of just adding that extra supplementation, I think she was giving him some like vitamin E capsules and all this kind of stuff. We looked up wry neck, and we just took the prescribed method on trying to deal with it. So you can go to that length if you want to save a bird. She did it. I'm glad she did it. He's a healthy rooster, and he's not very fluffy. But that's something that can pop up, and that was like a disturbing thing to deal with, because like their head is upside down. They're not in a good spot. So again, you have to make that determination of like, is the bird gonna pull through? So if you start administering some of these care tactics and it ain't working, then you have to make the determination, like, are you going to let the bird suffer, or are you going to put it out of its misery? That's something that you got to determine on an individual level. Some of the birds are just going to have deformities. We had a silky chick that had like a slight beak deformity, where it was a little crooked, like sideways like this, but the bird was able to drink, eat, do all the chicken things. So that's something, again, that you determine on your own. If you're looking for birds to produce and that's all you care about, and you have some of these things pop up where that's going to hinder these birds' ability to do that, then you're in control there. You got to make that decision. And there's a long list of deformities. I believe some breeds are more susceptible than others to certain things. So just make sure you do that research when you're starting at the beginning and figuring out what breeds you want to go with. Another very common thing for baby chicks, we've seen it in chicks that we've got from our local hatchery as well as chicks that we've had mailed to us, and it's known as pasty butt. So if you see on any of your baby chicks poop stuck on the back of their rear end, you need to clean that off, because if it is blocking their vent, that can kill them. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of that when you see it. It should clear up quickly after you start addressing it. Our preferred method is we just take a Q-tip, dunk it in some warm water. You don't want it to be cold, because the chicks, like I mentioned, are very susceptible to cold, but you don't want it super hot either, because you don't want to burn the chick. But just dipping the Q-tip in the water, just gently putting that around the affected area to loosen all that nonsense up, and just make sure the vent is clear. It'll probably take a few times of doing that, but it should clear up. And adding the electrolytes, and the Save-A-Chick has like a probiotic thing that you can put in the water as well. That'll help them as well and clear it up. I believe it's just like a stress thing. And I've got a chicken. A chicken is knocking on our front door right now. But that's very common, but you need to address it, because it has a potential to kill them. All right, so handling chicks and interacting with the chicks. They're very cute, cuddly, fluffy. Highly recommend handling them as much as you can when they're baby chicks, just because then they'll be more likely to let you handle them when they're older. But when they are brand new, try to limit it. Get them in the brooder, let them relax a little bit. Like I said, they've been through a lot of stress. Even if you're getting them from the store and just driving them back to your house, if that's only 15 minutes, them riding in a car, bumping around and everything, that's very stressful for them. So just let them be, just watch them. Especially if you have little kids, right? They're gonna wanna get in there and hold them and everything. Just give them some time. Probably at least 24 hours before you're picking them up and doing all that kind of stuff. But when that time comes, that, you know, after a day or two, and you want to start picking them up and holding them, that's awesome. But just practice proper hygiene, right? These birds are running around, pooping on each other, splashing in water and everything. So don't be licking them. Don't be picking up chicks and then eating a bag of Doritos. Wash your hands. Be safe and smart about it. I'm sure you can look up all the precautions that you want to take on that. I feel more confident in like the birds that we hatched and everything. I know that they've been in a clean environment, and we're not spreading disease or anything like that. But if you're getting them from, like, I would just say like a big box store, those birds might be a little bit more susceptible to disease and other things like that, and you don't want any of that affecting your family. So just be safe with your interaction with them. With little kids, we have a young daughter, so we know she likes to squeeze things. So don't be putting a tiny little baby chick or duckling in the hands of a young person that is gonna squeeze them and hurt them. I know they're gonna wanna hold them and everything, but make sure it's supervised and that you're safe, so that the birds don't get hurt, and so that nobody is traumatized by a chick getting the life squeezed out of it by a little kid. We already touched on pets, but just make sure you're doing that properly. Our dogs, we can put a little baby chick right up to their nose and they sniff it. You just got to know your pets. All it takes is like that, and then you got a chicken that's in a dog's mouth and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's just things that you don't want to happen, but it is important to let the baby chicks and ducklings interact with, specifically I would say dogs, because like when our dogs are out and about outside, they don't mind the chickens and ducks. The chickens and ducks aren't deathly afraid of them. They kind of keep their distance, but we don't have to worry about our dogs eating our birds because we've had them interact with the chicks and the ducks from basically day 2 on. And you just do it in small iterations, always supervised, and don't trust. Like, even our dogs, they're very sweet, but like I'm not gonna put a little duckling down with a Labrador Retriever around, and just think that everything's gonna be good to go all the time, because that's when bad things happen. Use common sense. That's all you gotta do. All right. So the chicks, as I mentioned before, they grow very, very fast. They're cute, cuddly, really small and fluffy for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then they start growing their feathers, and at 2 or 3 weeks, they are much bigger than they were when you first got them. So you got to start thinking about, all right, you got to get them coop ready. Hopefully you have a coop. If you don't have a coop, before you buy baby chicks, you're already wrong, and you should correct that problem immediately. So if you're watching this video and you're gonna get chicks or ducklings and you don't have a coop for them already, start getting it ready now before you get them, because things pop up and all of a sudden you've got chicks that need to get out of the brooder and you don't have a coop, and then you end up getting a super small, crappy Chinese manufactured coop, and you put them outside and your birds go from happy and healthy in their brooder to unhealthy and just not fun outside. So get the coop stuff squared away. Like I said, if you want me to do a similar type video on coop stuff, let me know and I can make that happen. Their feed, I probably should have touched on this earlier, but they have like chick raiser, chick grower, or starter feed. And you're going to feed that to them typically for the first like 8 weeks, and it's all on the bag. If you want to go organic or non-GMO or regular feed, that's all on you, whatever you're looking for. Any birds that you raise on your own, even if you're using just the conventional feed, those eggs are going to be more nutritious for you than ones that you buy at the grocery store. That's a fact. If you don't believe me, you can look it up. But that feed will change around, most of them are, I think they say 8 weeks on the bags. We just recently found a local feed mill near us, and we're using that for all of our meat birds, and I plan on making the change for our egg layers as well, just because they make their own feed. It's got like NutriBalancer in it, which is good stuff, and it's a little bit more inexpensive because they make it all themselves in their facility, which is their farm store. So it's not being shipped and all that nonsense. But just keep that in mind. So get enough feed for your birds to last about 8 weeks. And that's all going to be dependent on how many you have and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to just have to play around with it a little bit. So I think that's going to be about it for the chicks and ducklings. We haven't had any issues raising them together. The duckling, they're basically the same thing. The ducks grow a little bit faster. They make a little bit more mess because they like to splash the water around, so you'll have to change waterers more frequently and add in more pine shavings and all that kind of stuff, but they eat the same thing. They need a little bit of grit, and they interact fine. They don't pick on each other. They are bigger than their chick counterparts at the same age. They're significantly bigger, but thus far we haven't had any hurt each other, stomp on each other, or anything like that. And a big factor of that is the brooder size. So just make sure the brooder's big enough. So in your chick adventure here, kind of the last thing that you should be thinking about, probably before you get them as well, is kind of what setting are they going to be in when they're outside, right? Are you going to free range them? Or are you going to have a mobile setup with some electrified poultry netting? Is it going to be a stationary coop? All that kind of stuff. You want to have a plan for that, because if everything's laid out prior to you getting them, it eliminates a lot of the stress. You're able to enjoy the birds, interact with them, have fun without you thinking like, oh, I gotta build a coop. Like, I can't be in there enjoying the chicks because I gotta go build a coop. And they're only really small for a finite amount of time. So enjoy it, because they are super cute, and they're fun. They can be a little loud sometimes with the peeping, chirping, but now we've just it doesn't bother me, Jamie. Emmy Lou is quickly getting used to all of the birds around. They make a lot of noise outside, inside, but now it's just normal for us, so we don't even think about it. Yeah, I think that, I know this was kind of a lengthy video. I'm hoping that I provided enough information for y'all, but I will take any requests if you put them down in the comments on if there's any real specific things about this. If I can make a shorter form video about it, I will do so. And we got a lot of stuff coming up with these chicks, the ducks, with our meat birds. That whole process is going to be documented and will be on here. So like I said, this is our 3rd year raising poultry. So when we first got them, did I ever think that I'd be doing meat birds? No, but now we're going to do them. And it's going to be a learning experience. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm happy that y'all are along for the ride. And thank you, as always, for watching. I think we might have a little duck suit for Emmy Lou. And might be able to get some footage of her interacting with the ducks in her duck suit. So if so, I will add that right now. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. We greatly appreciate it, and I hope it was informative, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I will try to put a list of materials together and put it in my little Amazon thing down at the bottom. That way you can at least see what I'm talking about if I left any of the videos out. But thank you. See you on the next one.
Can you sit down here?
Can you sit down?
And Mama will give you the duckies, okay?
Let's sit down.
Good job.
Good job.
Okay, here you go.
Gentle. You love the duckies? I don't know how they feel about you. Gentle. Gentle. Good job. Nice and gentle.
They say hello.
Gentle. Gentle. Are you a ducky too? Can you quack? Quack, quack. They're eating your beans. They probably shouldn't be eating your beans. Can you say quack, quack? Gentle. Wow.